Hi there, welcome to this quick overview of our Blender add-on Loopmaster, which is an add-on that helps you to create seamless animation loops without any keyframes in a really fast and intuitive way. To install the add-on, you go to Preferences and in the top right corner, select Install from Disk, where you select the zip file you've downloaded. Once you have the add-on installed, you find it in 4 different places in Blender. The first one is in the 3D viewport, where you can select an item, and then in the top right, under Item, you now have a Loopmaster box where you can add and remove modifiers. You also find in the shader editor on the right side in the tabs now a Loopmaster entry, where you as well can add and remove Loopmaster modifiers, and the same applies to Geometry nodes, where you now have a tab called Loopmaster on the right side to add and remove modifiers. We also added some global Loopmaster settings in the Scene tab on the right side, where you see all the modifiers you use. You have 2 global settings for rotation and BPM. You have some powerful loop marker tools for the timeline and 2 utility functions. We will look into that in a bit. But now let's get started with animating in the 3D viewport. If you want to start animating with Loopmaster, that's super easy. You just select the item, go to the Loopmaster tab, add a new modifier, you rename it so you can find it easily later. Then you have different types and curves you can select. We leave that on the default. Then we set the Z-axis 2.2 and now we see it's already moving in a recurring sine wave. You can choose different curves, so sine, sine half, triangle. We also have a sawtooth and there's also square. We also added loopable noise, which we custom made and think that's really cool because now you have a really easy and fast way to add noise that's loopable in Blender. And also, of course, super powerful a tool to use your custom curves. So whatever you want to draw in there, you can do. And as you can see, there's no boundaries in curves you can create, and you can also reset the curve here. Besides the recurring type, we also have a progressive type. So let me demonstrate how that works with the new modifiers. We create a new hard rotation modifier for the second hard, and now we change the rotation to 45 on Y and Z on 90. And now if we change to the progressive mode, you see it kind of keeps on turning. And this is the difference with the recurring to the progressive mode, that progressive mode kind of stacks up and keeps on going. And here as well, we added different curve presets you can use. This is a lot of fun to just try some stuff out. And of course, we also added a custom curve here as well. So you can again be really creative and do the curves and the animations how you like them. We already animated the position and the rotation in the previous 2 hards, so with the third hard, let's animate the scale. And for this, we set the scale to 1, and as you can see now, it goes from 0 to 1. If you don't want that, and for example, start the animation at scale 1, then all you have to do is change the offset to 1. If you want to change the tempo of the animation, then you go to the BPM, which stands for beats per minute. And here you can drag the BPM number or type it in manually. You can also multiply or divide your BPM to, for example, half or double time. Another really useful feature is the BPM offset. So in order to show you what it does, I copy the first modifier to the second and third object. And then I offset the BPM on the second and third object. And now you see it kind of shifted the starting points of the animation, which is really cool for creative effects. One important thing you should keep in mind when animating with Loopmaster is the offset, because if you have an object, for example this heart that I move to the left and I change the default position, then once I add a value, for example to the location, the heart jumps back to its default position, which is 0, 0, 0. So if I want to keep the offset I set before, I can take that from the top, which is minus 0.89 something, and I can add it. And now I can add the location amplitude X here, and then it starts at the position that I defined before. So let's check out the global Loopmaster controls. They are on the right side under the Scene tab. You have a modifier list that shows you all the modifiers used in the project, and you can switch them on and off here. You also have an auto change rotation button that you in most cases want to keep on because this helps you to animate in decrease. There's also an option to change to BPM for new modifiers you add. Please keep in mind this does not change the BPM of already existing modifiers. We also added some really useful tools for loop markers in the timeline. So if you select a modifier and it markers for selected modifier, you actually see visually the loop points of this modifier. And you can resize also the timeline and hit it again, and then you see where your loop is looping. There's also more functionality to it, so you can delete all the loop markers and then you set new ones if you change the modifiers you selected. And also there's this option to show markers for all the enabled modifiers. So you see on the timeline all the loop points of all the modifiers you use. You can also highlight the selected modifier. So if you have multiple markers on the timeline, you can highlight the one you have selected right now. And then we also added a function CLF, which stands for Common Loop Frame, which shows you all the active modifiers and where they loop together. So that's super handy. Below that, you find two utility functions to clean up modifiers and also delete all loopmaster entities, but be careful because if you do that, then all your loopmaster modifiers are gone. With the loopmaster add-on, you can really easily and quickly animate materials as well. So for this, you go in the shader editor and in the tabs on the right side, you find loopmaster. And here you can add a new modifier. We call it color change, and then you add it through the groups. When you select it, you have one output, and this output you can plug in pretty much anywhere. You can also separate the three values, X, Y, and Z. And now if we add 1 for the X value and we plug it into the color ramp, you see we already have a cool color change here with the sine wave to 125 BPM. And you could do everything that we did before in the 3D viewport. So you can do a lot of different animation stuff. You can create your own curve for the animation. You can also change the color ramp and add some new colors, for example. And there's a lot of stuff that you can do. Most of the values in the shader editor, you can animate that. For example, also the alpha channel, or you can plug in the value into the roughness to animate this. So there's tons of possibilities. It's actually super easy to animate cameras with Loopmaster as well. All you need to do is select the camera and add a modifier. And then if you want to keep the position or the rotation of the current camera, you need to copy the values into the offset. And then you can just enter what you want to animate. For example, here we added a noise and we want to animate the rotation with the noise. So we just add the noise and then add some values. And as you can see, now we already have a really cool looping camera animation with noise. But we can also add a second modifier and say, for example, we want the camera to move forward and backward. So we just add the second modifier and animate the Y value. And then, as you can see, we made a really cool looping camera animation. You can also animate null objects, which is super handy. So for example, we create a null object and then we parent these four halves to the null object. And now we can add a loopmaster modifier for the null object and, for example, change the rotation. So we say animate in a 45 degrees angle and do it progressive. And now you see all the hearts are rotating. But what's super cool is we can then also activate and use modifiers on these hearts. So they are still having their own animation, but together with the null object, it gets super easy to make a bit more complex animations really quickly. It's actually super easy to animate rigs with Loopmaster as well. All you have to do is select a rig, then go into pose mode and select a bone. To this bone, you then add a new Loopmaster modifier, and this modifier you give some values for the location, rotation or scale, whatever you want to animate. You then choose the curves you like, you set the BPM, and then you're basically done. You do this for a few bones and then you have an animation like you see it on your screen now, which took us like 30 seconds to do. With Loopmaster, it's also really easy to animate lights, so I create a new area light here for an example, and you can also animate the position, the scale, and the size with the normal 3D viewport Loopmaster tools. And then in the shader editor, you can actually use nodes to animate the light. So here I also have a Loopmaster tab in the shader editor, and I can add a modifier like we did before on all the other animation stuff we did. And I call it light, and then I can find the modifier in the group section again under map light. And if I plug that in, I already set the value to 1. You see now the light strength is animating in a perfect sine wave, perfectly looped to 120 BPM. So to see that, you have to switch on cycles because this is not supported in Eevee with the light nodes. So keep that in mind, and this is why it looks a bit grainy. You're not just limited to animating the strength, but you can also animate the color, and this is also really cool and powerful. For this, I add a color ramp, and I change it from white to red, and plug that into the color, and in the factor, I just add the output from the Loopmaster node, and then you see the light switches here also perfectly in a sine wave from white to red. There are definitely more possibilities to animate light, so feel free to play around with that. You can also use Loopmaster in your geometry node setups. So to give you a simple example, we made this array here of the hearts. And to this, we add a Loopmaster modifier that we find under groups again. And we plug this into the separate XYZ node and change the value of X. And because we put that into the rotation, you see now the hearts are rotating on the X-axis. You can again choose different curves or use a custom curve for this animation. You can also use the progressive type for progressive animations. And of course, you can also change the Y and Z values so you can rotate it on different axes. There are a lot more possibilities to the geometry nodes, like plugging it into a render node and making it rotate randomly, so try it out and have fun with it. Thank you for checking out this quick video of our Blender add-on Loopmaster. If you want to see more tutorials about complex animations you can do with it, then feel free to leave us a comment or send us a message. Thank you and have fun looping.